federal government is to partly fund 6 rail projects connecting virtually all regions of the country, with a counterpart funding of 71.15 billion naira this year. According to a report from the Federal Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning shows that 15.1 billion naira will be spent on the development of safety and security critical projects, airport certification, runway construction, terminal buildings, amongst others in the aviation sector in 2021. The government stated that the 71.15 billion naira will serve as counterpart funding for the projects including Lagos-Kano Railway Line ongoing, and the Calabar-Lagos ongoing, and Ajaokuta-Etakpe-Alaja Warri, which is also described as an ongoing project. Others are Port Harcourt-Maiduguri Railway and New Kano-Katsina Jimbia-Maradi line in Niger Republic, and the Abuja-Itakpe and Alaje Warri ports, refinery Warri New Harbour. In the report, the Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Zainab Ahmed, says the government is optimistic that there would be significant improvement in macroeconomic performance by the second quarter of 2020. Now, still on the discussion on the monetary policy direction of the CBN and its interventions, traditionally the Monetary Policy Committees reveals the development in the domestic economies and the state of the financial markets, while making possible projections on the outlook as guidance for its decisions. However, with the rising cases of inflation in the country, it is believed that monetary tightening could pose a threat for the flow of credit to the real sector of the economy and prolong the recovery phase, contradicting previous policies of the Central Bank of Nigeria. Still discussing the possible outcome of the policy decision makers, I have joining me now via Skype is the Chief Executive Officer of Cowry Assets Management Limited, Mr. Johnson Chukwu. Thank you very much for joining us on the show, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Tolu, for having me. Good afternoon.
Yes. First, a country in recession, growth rate not looking too good. We are also operating multiple exchange rates at the moment. What do you make of this meeting? It's like the Monetary Policy Committee have a lot to grapple with today.
Yes, clearly they have contradictory factors to try to balance. You did mention the issue of multiple exchange rates. Of course, I will add to that the exchange rate pressure, or the pressure on the naira. We know that it has not met all the demands of foreign portfolio investors who wanted to exceed the market, or who sold their instrument and wanted to convert back to dollar. We also know that there is the inflationary pressure is still persisting. We saw an inflation rate came at a print of 15.75% in December 2020. And on the converse, we are dealing with an economy that is in recession, which requires stimulus. We saw the economy contract grew only by 1.87% in the first quarter of last year, to contract by 6.1% in the second quarter, and contract further by 3.62% in the second quarter. So these are indications that the economy also requires stimulus. So at the same time, you're dealing with an economy that is in contraction that requires stimulus. On the converse, you're dealing with an economy where price level is increasing on a daily basis. We're dealing with inflation rate as high as 15.75%, and they're also contending with FX pressure. So for me, I think the central bank will have to balance, has to deal with a delicate balancing act, or the monetary authorities have to deal with the delicate balancing act. They need to balance between the need to continue to stimulate the economy so that we can come out of recession, as well as the need to moderate the current rate of inflation and also tamper with the current pressure on FX.
Mr. Johnson, but the CBN has also in some cases talked about non-conventional monetary policies, where I'll say this is a paradigm shift from what we used to have. Would you say that's the way to go?
Well, we've been dealing with unconventional monetary policy for quite some time. In the first place, conventional monetary policy will require that if inflation rate is 15.75%, your benchmark rate should be above inflation rate. The unconventional monetary policy means that we have a depressed monetary policy rate at 11.5%, and we even go beyond that. We have money market instruments trading at just about 1% for the tenor, that's treasury bills. And you all know that the treasury bills should mirror the inflation rate. So we're really dealing with unconventional monetary policy environment. And then we've seen the monetary authorities try to stimulate the economy through what you may call the Development Finance Initiative. There's a 1.15 trillion or 1.1 trillion naira out there, $100 billion, 100 billion naira for the pharmaceutical industry, 1 trillion naira for the critical industrial sectors, and that 50 billion for the small and medium scale enterprises and households that are badly affected. These are unconventional monetary tools that the central bank has deployed to try to manage the economic situation of the country. So we've been with it, he's been with us for quite some time. As it stands today, Nigeria is not the only country that has deployed unconventional monetary policies. The concerns among economists actually that when COVID vaccination improves, we could actually see the central bank, not just Nigerian central bank, roll back or reverse the unconventional monetary policies and restore normalcy to the monetary environment and the impact on that on investment as well as savings.
Very interesting one. And now another thing is exiting recession. The Minister of Finance has said that, well, with all that I've been doing, if we move on the space, the country might exit recession at the end of the first quarter this year. But some are saying that seems to be like a tall order. Now, the central bank also has a role to play in this. That's talking about exiting recession. What do you make of this, and what do you think needs to be done by the Apex Bank?
Okay, let me start from what the minister said, that Nigeria is likely going to exit recession in the first quarter of this year. I think that's a bit of it. But I must also accede to the fact that she made that projection without recognizing the fact that COVID will continue its ravaging of the global economy, and the rate of inflation in the country has actually surpassed what we ever saw during the first coming of COVID, or what they call the first phase of infections. So we have also we have seen an economy that has failed to achieve traction in the first quarter of this year, or at least the first month of this year, because of the health pandemic. And I doubt if the minister factored that into place. But beyond that, I think when you talk of what are the tools, I think the central bank will soon run out of tools to intervene in the economy. We should be relying a lot more on the fiscal authorities. The fiscal authority has come up with a budget and the expansionary fiscal plan, a budget with about 5.6 trillion naira deficit, 13.55 trillion naira of expenditure, where the government is planning just about 7.89 trillion as its revenue, which to me in the first place is too optimistic. And we've seen the previous year where the monetary authority or central bank funded the federal government by allowing the federal government to overdraw its position to the tune of more than 3 trillion naira. So that also means that the central bank is getting to its limit to intervene in the economy to the extent of bringing the economy out of recession. So I want to believe that we're going to be looking up to the fiscal authorities in the coming months. Let's see how they deploy the fiscal plan, that is the budget. As an expansionary budget will ordinarily stimulate the economy, particularly if it's invested in infrastructure. In that budget, there's a provision of 4.1 trillion naira for infrastructure development. But unfortunately, the capacity of the government to invest in infrastructure will be largely driven by its capacity to meet the revenue projections, as well as to access borrowing from both the local and international markets.
So, Mr. Johnson, talking about FX now, which is something that is really topical, that's foreign exchange issues, do you also agree that the central bank might continue to play this same role of defending and sustaining the currency until there might be a rebound in the price of crude?
You know, interestingly, we have to recognize the fact that because of the structure of the Nigerian economy, the central bank is a dominant player, is a market maker in the FX market. So whatever that a market maker will determine what prices will obtain in the market. So whatever price of dollar that the central bank wants to drive, is in a sole position to do that. As it stands today, we don't have multiple foreign exchange earning sources. So given that almost all the earnings are coming to the central bank is the only one with the wherewithal to intervene in the market. So we don't have a choice of whether the central bank should continue to intervene in the market or not. It's only one with the resources to intervene in the market, and therefore it will continue to shape the exchange in the economy until the economy broadens and becomes more diversified. Whether the central bank should continue to intervene, clearly without
And let's now look at diversification of our economy, which is something that is also key at this time. We've seen investments in the agricultural sector, interventions in the pharmaceutical sector, interventions in the clothing, garmenting industry, and all of this. In your assessment, Mr. Chukwu, you've been monitoring all of this. What level of impact would you say this has had regards to job creation and inclusive growth in all of it? Or some argue that there's going to be a transition period. How long are we going to wait for us to see all of this?
You know, the challenge we have with intervention funds, in as much as good, well-intended as they are, is that they are linkages within the value chains of these industries where the central bank intervening that are missing. For instance, take the textile industry. You realize that there's no power supply. Without power supply, the textile industry will not be able to function effectively. You need to align your trade policies with the central bank interventions so that goods coming from another country are properly taxed in terms of duty or barriers to competition. And those barriers should be such that will not encourage inefficiencies in the industries you are even trying to protect. But most importantly, you must have supporting infrastructure. Supporting infrastructure in this sense that are we having the feedstock, for instance, the textile industry. We have the feedstock, we have the cottons, the quality cottons to produce in those industries. Do these industries or industrial outlets have the power supply? Do they have the transport infrastructure to support that? Do they have the appropriate labor? So that the central bank funding will only come in to help them achieve or acquire competitive or efficient machinery that can compete with other machineries in other parts of the world. But without the feedstock, which is the cotton, without the power supply, without the appropriate labor, you find out that the money that central bank is providing will not be able to revive the industries as intended. So that's part of the challenges we are dealing with. We must recognize that beyond funding, there are other limiting factors that are restricting capacity of several industries to actually spring up in the country. And we must address those limiting factors. Chief among them is the power supply issues, the quality of labor, the issue of insecurity, and because this insecurity situation is affecting the production and availability of feedstock, even where we should produce those items.
Let's also look at the issue of de-risking some sectors. There's an argument that the Nigerian government, as the fiscal side, need to de-risk some sectors so as to catalyze growth and encourage job creation and all of this. I don't know if you also buy to that, because at the moment, I think, do we have some quick wins?
Okay, before I answer if we have some quick wins, the risking an industry will include some of the things I just mentioned.
Okay.
Particularly, I mentioned the issue of feedstock. If you have to be, for instance, going to rice milling, you need to be sure that you have your feedstock all the time, which simply means that the issue of insecurity, where the feedstock is produced, will be addressed.
Yeah.
The other challenges that you could deal with the weather. Then you also be able to transport those feedstock to where you have the milling plant. That's one of those things you follow. Then the other risking element we a lot of times focus a lot more attention on is the issue of funding or credit risk. And when we talk of risk sharing arrangement, where you have partial risk guarantees, either coming from the federal government or coming from the World Bank. But in a lot of instances, for instance, the funds coming from the central bank, there is some level of risk sharing with the local banks and the investors or the borrowers. So we need to also strengthen the issue of credit risk mitigation, which is one of the focus of most people when they are talking of that. And then your last part of your question, which is, are there quick wins? The key thing about industrialization or diversification of an economy is not a light effect. It's not something you come into a dark room and just switch on the bulb, the light, turn the switch and the place becomes brightened up. It's going to to be a meticulous and gradual process. But once you define the primary objective, like we've done in the past, where we came to the cement industry and we had a cement plan or a plan for cement industrialization, and the government followed it diligently. One certain point was they gave only license for importation of bulk cement to those who were building cement factories, and that's incentivized them to build the factories. And over time, they specified a timeline beyond which those bulk cement trading licenses will no longer apply. And that's what happened. By the time they withdrew those licenses, the industry had become matured and the industry has grown. We can repeat that in a couple of industries where we have comparative advantage, where we can produce a major feedstock. And like I also said, the other de-risking elements, including infrastructural deficiency, will also have to be addressed.
All right, indeed. I don't envy the CBN governor at this time. A lot of job for him to handle. Mr. Johnson, hold on a minute. I still want your views with regards to the close of trading today. Let me just reel out these figures and get my colleagues' view in the studio. I also like your view. So hold on a minute. We'll be back to you, Mr. Johnson Chukwu. Monday's trading is closing positive with the all-share index up 0.21%. Top gainers, we have Dangote Cement, MRS, Julius Berger, WAPCO, May & Baker. Top losers, we have Adova, NASCON, CR9 Leasing International, Beeries, and Unilever. FM The Week is starting positive. Take it away.
Yes, Tulu, but we expect very cautious trading this week in the sense that investors have to key into the decision of the central bank on the monetary policy situation. Will the rates go up? Will they stabilize or under? You understand? And then with the fear of the effects of coronavirus, running around and turning the economy upside down, investors need to be terribly cautious how they part with money. We saw last week that they were holding back, investable funds, and the level of investment in the market dropped. Even today, if you look at the volume, we are trading just a little above the value is just a little above 2 billion naira. That's very, very low. Remember, some weeks ago, we crossed up to 7 billion, 8 billion, 6 billion, 5. Do you understand? So even the total volume of trade today, when I looked coming in here, was about 320 million shares, very, very minimal. So that is to say, even those who have taken profit from the markets, they are not going to be very, very forthcoming, running back, but to hold on to see. Although there is just one incentive remaining in the markets, that is taking profit from last quarter of business, especially of the banks of 2020. One really needs to be cautious because the larger economy, doesn't really, hold inviting incentives.
Indeed. Let me get Mr. Johnson Chukwu's view. Mr. Johnson, I'm even looking at the impact of whatever decision that comes out of the meeting. Do you see it affecting investors' confidence or what's playing out at the exchange at the moment? It's starting the week positive.
Yes, certainly. If you even look at what has happened in the market so far, it was largely driven by the conventional monetary policies. So if you have a normalization of monetary policies, you're going to see people exit the equities market and go back to fixed income space. Clearly, the outcome of monetary policy decisions will have effect on the equities market. But like I said, I expect the central bank to keep rates at current levels, so which means we have a neutral effect on the equities market. What will now drive the equity market in the event that the central bank maintains rates at current level will be the benefitism. As companies declare their year-end results and declare dividend, investors will now go back to the market to embrace the dividend receipt opportunities. So I think that's what will happen. A lot of factors, a lot of investments in the coming months will be driven by the need to earn dividend income from these quoted companies. But if the monetary policy changes drastically, then that will be the most overriding factor that will influence investment in the market.
Mr. Johnson Chukwu, I thank you very much for your time. Chief Executive Officer, Cowry Assets Management Limited. Thank you for joining us on the show.
My pleasure.